This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Welcome to Soccer Today. Before we get going, I want to apologize for the 6,000 Pablo Zavaleta tweets that I sent out yesterday, but it was a very emotional day for me. Pablo, thanks for all the memories. You got one more game left, I guess, on the road to City. Pretty much wraps up the Champions League spot yesterday. It would take Arsenal overturning 6 goals on the differential for that to not happen. So I guess that was an okay day, although not really the way I foresaw the Manchester City season going in. But let's not talk about that anymore because we have a great guest on the line, one of our favorites, one of our regulars, Jonathan Tannenwald. He joins us. How you doing, Jonathan?
I want the three-way playoff. I want the English soccer purists have to experience our American way of life.
You know what? I had this debate very briefly yesterday, Jonathan, where I wonder why they haven't never suggested a 4v5 playoff game every year. Could you imagine the corporate financial fallout, like how much that would make money, how big of a TV audience that would get? That would be spectacular theater.
But it would be corporate and financial, and I think that's part of what we're going to talk about today, isn't it?
Well, precisely. Yeah, Jonathan actually approached me yesterday. There was Don Garber made a little pit stop in Montreal. He said a few things that we're going to talk about in great detail. I think Kevin might go on a bit of a rant after we're done with Jonathan in 15 minutes or so. But what were your thoughts on Don Garber's sort of pit stop in Montreal and some of the stuff that he said yesterday, Jonathan?
Well, first of all, I think he's a much better commissioner than Gary Bettman or Roger Goodell.
Well, the bar is not that high, but
no, it's not. But Garber does this throughout the year. He just shows up and he talks to people and he takes questions and he makes himself available, which not every other commissioner of every other league is always so prone to do. And yes, he stirs the pot a little bit, and as often is the case with public figures, when they come into town, they have something to say. And Don Garber evidently had something to say, which is that not enough people are going to impact games. And I would ask you, Kevin, is he wrong? Because I don't think he is.
He's not wrong if you're looking at one game, an example. If you're looking at one example, the last game, or if you just take one game here and there. If you're looking at as a whole, the growth and some big attendance that Montreal did get that almost no other MLS team did get over the years. And as a whole, he's wrong. On a single game basis, maybe he's right. But there's factors that he is not aware of, not necessarily being familiar with the market, the club, the stadium, the actual place, what's going on in the entire world. And so there's a lot more than just necessarily the impact not having a good enough footprint in the actual market to be warranted of an MLS All-Star game and explain this because of last week's game not full, right? It's more complicated than that.
The All-Star game thing was a little bit of a red herring.
Oh, yeah. No,
because that was decided a long time ago.
It's in Chicago this year. Like, have you watched a Chicago game? Did you watch a debut of Schweinsteiger? Anyways, I'll keep my rant for later.
Well, right, but when you get a shot at Real Madrid, you're going to play them in a Soldier Field. You're probably not going to play them in a 20,000-seat stadium. Look, and we've known for the last year and a half that the All-Star game this year wasn't coming to Montreal. That they wanted to do something, and maybe that was going to be helping to arrange a big international friendly or something like that, and it didn't happen. But I don't think Garber's wrong, and I don't think Garber is wrong beyond the one game. I think Garber is right. And I say that as somebody who has covered the Impact since they were in the second division. Montreal has for a long time had the reputation as being an event town. And even though the Impact have overtaken the Alouettes as the second team in the city, they haven't established quite a big enough consistent fan base yet, I don't think. I think Garber's right about that, and I say that as somebody who has been up there a lot and who has been coming up there for a long time. I think he is right to try to light a fire under folks, to try to get a few more, get a little bit of a bigger season ticket base. I remember asking Nick DeSantis probably 2 years ago at this point. It was Yeah, it was after I came up for the Montreal Columbus playoff game. What was that, 2015, I think? And I remember asking Nick DeSantis that night after the game, how are you preparing now for the time when Drogba leaves so that you capitalize on all of this and keep these folks around after he's gone? And he acknowledged it was something that they were already starting to work on because they had to, because they knew how many of the fans were coming to see Drogba and were maybe becoming Impact fans, but weren't quite ready to buy season tickets yet.
Jonathan, speaking of timing and timing of announcements and having something to say, the other thing that got people's attention was sort of Garber claiming that they're prepared and ready to open a Canadian MLS audience or office, pardon me, which begs a couple questions. First off, why should we believe them now when I tweeted out an article from 2010? Yeah, well, that's my question. Like, is that just, window dressing? Is that just him providing, giving lip service to the Canadian questions about this in reaction to the Canadian Premier League to try and undervalue that a little bit? Like, what's with that statement now?
I don't think that Garber has earned the benefit of the doubt from many Canadian fans at this point. And I think that some of the criticisms that we've seen of him, including from Steve Sandor yesterday, who wrote a column that I quite enjoyed, are perfectly valid about how people are going to turn away from MLS if they don't believe that it's actually paying attention to the Canadian game. Except there's one small problem, and it's one that I've referred to before, and that is that the MLS teams are popular in their markets. That might not mean they're popular all the way across Canada, and there absolutely is going to be a place for the Canadian Premier League alongside MLS. But, as I've said a number of times before, I'm not sure it's going to reach MLS's level of scale and ambition of infrastructure and operations and money going around and crowds and things like that. I'm not fully sold. And between that and another piece that I read recently, which was by Ben Massey, who I disagree on about a number of things sort of philosophically, but I enjoy his writing and I think it's pretty smart. He wrote about going to a TSS Rovers game out at Swangard in Vancouver, and about how he enjoyed sort of the authenticity of the experience. I'm pulling up the quote now. It said, Ben called it, and I quote, high-level soccer free of nonsense, not a monolithic corporate experience, end quote. I know people are frustrated with the Whitecaps being a monolithic corporate experience in a lot of ways, but allow me, Duane, to offer the following, and I think this is something that you in particular have experienced in Toronto, and Kevin, you've experienced it too in Montreal. There's virtue in bigness. Not perfect amount of virtue by any means, but it might just be a good thing. Most of professional sports in America carries that sense of bigness. And even though we think that English soccer and German soccer and all the European soccer that we see on TV, we think that's the authentic experience, the three of us know that there's very little authentic about the Premier League experience anymore, is there? It's all corporate, especially the big clubs that everybody holds up as the models for authenticity. Obviously, the baseball over here, American football, basketball, hockey, all have that sense of bigness, and a lot of soccer fans in this country, even those who are in supporters clubs, banging drums, waving scarves, occasionally lighting smoke bombs or whatever, want to have that sense of bigness in the game in the US and Canada. There's room for the small and the small community. And, I think we have seen, gents, that there's a little bit of hipster element to that. And, it's cool and trendy, and it allows one to feel exclusive, which is awfully important in our society, isn't it? But I am on the bigness side of things. I have seen it succeed at times in MLS. I think the MLS Cup final last year was an example of that, with a full house at BMO Field and all the stars that were playing and so on and so forth. And I'd be willing to bet, Duane, that the CPL would like a little bit of that bigness of it to get.
Oh, for sure, obviously. And I think the CPL is using a lot of MLS as models, but I'm going to let Kevin jump in now, Jonathan.
What I'm wondering, Jonathan, is when we look at example, we're talking about Montreal, so let's take Montreal as an example. Like, yes, MLS, since it came in, it changed everything. It brought the club from becoming mainstream, having a 13, 14,000 hardcore, maybe not necessarily hardcore, but you had a good presence and you were doing very well. But the perspective of the big league in North America at that time is there was no Canadian Premier League, there's still none, and it had that feeling of we made it to the big league and now it's the big leagues and things were all done more professionally at almost all levels. And yeah, it did bring that, and for the supporters it did help a lot at the beginning, and now there seemed to be a up and down. That's how supporters cultures go. Sometimes it's more ruckus, sometimes it's not. There's a lot of sanctions on the supporters right now. But when you're looking at the actual atmospheres in MLS games since the beginning, since 2012, I have to say I have been impressed. And when I look on my TV and for what experience, I've seen games in Toronto. That was our MLS Cup final. I was there for maybe the craziest game I've ever seen in soccer to this day in my lifetime, the home and away Eastern Conference final last year. And yeah, I think soccer does feel that, like that big feeling like you mentioned, Jonathan. I think it's there, and I think it's wrong to say that Montreal is it as big as it can get. No, of course it isn't anywhere. It could always be better, it could always be big, but I don't think that it's necessarily good for the entire for the city to be berated the way they were.
I understand. Duane, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, no doubt, Jonathan, that's the case there. But I know Jonathan's tight on time, so why don't you answer that question? Then we're gonna have to say goodbye to Jonathan today.
Because I think even if Garber's language was stronger than it should have been, I think it was a reminder of a couple of things. One is that Montreal has set a standard for much of the rest of MLS, especially the American clubs, in terms of the exposure it gets. You get double or sometimes triple the number of TV cameras and media and so on at your average impact practice that you do at some games in the league. Certainly, you know, there's two or three reporters at a Philadelphia Union practice or a Columbus Crew practice or a Real Salt Lake practice. And there's 15 or 20 at an impact practice every day. But I think it was also a reminder, and I think the Impact know this, but it helps them to have a little bit of extra impetus. You reach the big leagues and you can't stand still. And this is a lesson that the Philadelphia Union have been taught again and again and again, although they've, I think, sort of refused to learn it. You come in at the level that the Union were at and the level of the Impact were at, and then the level of the rest of MLS keeps rising and you have to rise with it. Does that mean that you have to expand Stade Saputo? No, but it means that you do have to cultivate in a city that has a reputation as an event town, with the only exception being the Canadians. You do have to try to keep building that base, and I think the Impact have done a good job, but it's a reminder, I think, that nobody ever gets to stop. You know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, Jonathan. And again, I know you're tight on time today. We do appreciate you getting your insight in here. I know you like to get that out there. So quickly tell people why you're in New York today, and maybe we'll touch base down the line to hear what you learned.
I am actually heading over to Major League Soccer headquarters in a few minutes for a press roundtable with the new Secretary General of CONCACAF, Felipe Maggio, ostensibly about the Gold Cup, but we'll see what else comes along. I have some questions, especially about the World Cup bid. Speaking of bigness, by the way, that's about the biggest of bigness that you can get. Even bigly, perhaps, we might even use the popular phrase of these days. No, but look, I think the whole thing is a reminder, and I'm living through this in Philadelphia now. Obviously, Duane, Toronto has been through this. Vancouver goes through this. Every club in the league, the Red Bulls absolutely are going through it right now. Is another great example. You reach a level and you have to keep swimming. You can't let up as the Atlantas of the world come in and raise the bar a little more, as Portland expands Providence Park and raises the bar a little more, as LAFC comes in next year and raises the bar a little more. I think the Impact have done really great in a lot of things. It's just a reminder of something that I think we all know, Kevin, which is that they aren't all the way there, even where they want to be, or where a lot of the fans in Montreal want them to be yet.
That's fine. I can get behind that.
All right, Jonathan, we'll say goodbye to you now. We'll let you get to what you need to do. Kevin, we'll take a quick break and we'll let him go on his rant.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Kevin, in all of the years that I have been going to Quebec, been going to Montreal, had a little bit of an understanding of what makes that province and city tick. One thing that I've learned is that Montrealers and Quebecers just love it when outsiders tell them how to act and how to be. Correct?
Yeah, right. Yeah. That always goes down. That goes over pretty well, right? As a whole, when put like Jonathan said, what can I do? Yeah, you're right. Montreal is not at the level that I wish it could be. There's only not even 10,000 season tickets sold. Yeah. And there was pockets of empty fans. And if you listen to Off the Woodworks of last weekend, coming back from the debut of Blair and Zamali, I went on a rant. And yeah, people were not there. They didn't show up. And I was disappointed. Should have been at the airport compared to what the Drogba situation was. It was kind of sad. Yeah, I'll get behind that. But saying as a whole that what he's basically saying is that there's not enough big corporate partners, sponsors right now in the Montreal vicinity city that sponsors the club to warrant an MLS All-Star game. That's fine. I agree. That's no problem there. But if you would have put Real Madrid against Montreal, guess what? There's 65,000 people at the Big O. Anywhere you put that game, there's 65,000 at the Big O. Does Chicago deserve it? As a city, yeah. As a club, no. Anyways.
Yeah. If they're just looking at attendance, they could have put it in Pasadena and probably put 100,000 in to watch the game, right? At the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, exactly.
Or down in Dallas, they could have played it at, AT&T Stadium, whatever the Cowboys play out now.
Exactly. It would have been over 100,000 people or something, right? But I do have the feeling that he came into town with a narrative, right? And trying to bring the narrative. He wasn't asked those questions. It was part of his preamble. So you start almost with start off with a jab, right? It's like, okay, all right. In theory, I can understand the outside view that it has. Yes. And I can understand that now with the recent results, there's a feeling where, yeah, it was a little bit more difficult to get people at Stade Saputo. The walk-up crowd, it's bigger than it should be. Yeah, there's not enough season tickets. I agree. There should be more. I don't want to say more efforts done by the club, but there should be just more effort made by the people. The effort has been there. And if you're looking at the past investment of Joey Saputo, now it's kind of time to make some returns, right? So yeah, is it at its best it could be? No. Does it need to be? It's hard to. I don't feel insulted. No, I just feel like, well, we're just still there since Montreal's been in the league since 2012. Look at the big elephant in the league, in the town. It's the Montreal Canadiens. It's like trying to battle the Cowboys in Dallas. Nobody's talking about FC Dallas versus the Cowboys. Nobody's saying, oh, FC Dallas should be bigger. You know what I mean? It kind of feels like a double standard.
No, yeah, and maybe that's a bit of the potential versus reality. They look at FC Dallas and they look at the problems that they have with the location of the stadium and so forth and say, well, maybe this is the best that they can do. And it'd be kind of like kicking someone when they're down to bash that. Whereas Montreal, we saw how many people would show up for the Toronto series, how many people show up for the big events like the CCL final. And then you kind of have a difficult, an issue trying to put that together, right? Like, how can they do that and then turn to this immediately after? And Montreal, if you're not from there, is a bit of a difficult city to get a handle on because it does have a unique character and culture that to most of North America. In fact, when you talked about the Habs, I'm not sure there's another professional sports team in North America that has a greater grip on a community than the Montreal Canadiens do in terms of the overall concept or overall like community, like how big they are in that city. If you follow that, what I'm saying there. So
It's not even the city. It's like I wouldn't say the province, but it's how people feel. Like this, like just go back in the playoff the day after Montreal was eliminated. It was hard to find somebody in a good mood. It's almost that extent. Yeah, it's not as big as it used to be, and with the advent of new technologies, there's a lot of fans of new sport and like people like us, and that. But there is like competition, and it's not always fought with the same resources. You can't compare the resources of the Impact versus the Montreal Canadiens. It's non-comparable.
I compare Toronto to Montreal in terms of this conversation, and the Leafs are very big here, but it's not the same. It doesn't have the same universal grip on a city that I see in the Habs. Like when you go to Montreal, it's literally everywhere. In a way that's just not the same in any other Canadian city that I've been to. And Canadian cities love their hockey teams. They do. And as I said, when the Leafs were in the playoffs this year, the city was electric for that. It was a little awkward for me, but that's an aside. But nonetheless, that's just it though. Like, I don't know if you see in Montreal, would see people like me in the same way because of the universality of the Montreal Canadiens' grip on, as you say, an entire culture that goes beyond Montreal. Now, the Nordiques, they come back, that might change things a bit again, but nonetheless, it's a real big problem for the Impact. And it's why I think Montreal is a big event city when it's outside of hockey, because they just don't have that day-to-day sort of attachment that they do with the hockey club. So when a big event happens, they're happy to go out and watch it. Even you look at the Expos no longer exist, but you look when the Blue Jays come to town, that's almost like an Expos game. Like those 2 days are just about all the Expos fans getting together in many ways, right? And it's almost a big event unto itself.
Don't get me started on those games. Don't get me started.
Okay, well,
it just hurts every time. Why do you come back here and bring up like feelings of 10 years ago? Leave the memories alone. Anyways, that's something else.
Yes. Well, and look, to go back to my original point, Montrealers are proud, and they don't react well to the approach Garber took. As soon as I heard that, I was like, oh man, you don't understand the culture at all if you're going to do that. Like, essentially the Expos left out of spite by the people. They're like, screw you, we're not coming back now. It's like, in some way I respect that. I mean, it's unfortunate for baseball fans in the city, but after '94, the Montreal just turned its back on that team. Was turning its back on Major League Baseball, and they're only now kind of ready to embrace it back again. It's not the right approach to take with Montreal or Quebec to tell them what to do. You have to be a little bit more understanding, I think, of their uniqueness.
And I get it. I get it. He came here yesterday wanting to jumpstart things up again, right? Wanting to stir, right? And kind of worked.
I suppose, yeah, it's got the conversation going. We're talking about it, but he's pissed people off. Whether or not they follow, if it's about the corporate support, and I could buy that angle there. Like, fans are going to fan, and it's going to be a struggle, I think, for a while until the Impact. I don't know. It's a strange one that way. Montreal's just, as I said, they're single event. They don't necessarily want to buy in with the season tickets, from what I see from an outside perspective, anyway, and in the same way that maybe another market might, but they're going to get big crowds when it warrants it, right? When big teams coming into town, when the Impact are doing well, they'll ebb and flow. That's just how it's going to be for the Impact, I think, and maybe we need to accept that.
I think,
but if you're talking about the corporate side of things and sort of the financial support of the club beyond that, which may be very well what they're talking about, in particular, when we tie it into what I'm going to take this to in a second, the advent of the Canadian Premier League, perhaps, as we learned with the Paul Byrne interview yesterday, perhaps coming into the province. That might be where those comments were directed more to, is like, you need to support this more if you want us to bring big corporate events up here. As you said, of course, Real Madrid would have sold out there, but would Real Madrid have gotten the same sort of financial backing from the corporate community? I don't know. And that's something maybe Kevin could answer better to, but nonetheless might have been what Don Garber was talking about, Kevin. Final thoughts before I move it to the Canadian Premier League side of this?
Yeah, there's also the aspect of the habit of season tickets, right? It hasn't become a habit for Montreal sports fans season tickets due to economy factors, due to timing factors, due to that the summer is so short that people don't want to commit to what they do because they only have a certain amount of time to enjoy things, right? So all those little aspects have made that it's hard to sell season tickets. It's not as easy as expected, and it takes more work than anticipated over the years to sell season tickets. And that I do feel that there needs to be a better commitment by the actual supporters, fans especially, to get their butts in the seat and to commit to be there with that season tickets. And guess what? It's cheaper. So, yeah, as someone who used to be a season ticket holder, I do understand the benefits of having season tickets. It's a lot better to have season tickets. If you think you're gonna make it to most of the games, you're better off buying a season ticket. It's gonna be cheaper than getting the single ticket. So, yeah, I can agree that if he was talking about the corporate aspect where they need more big corporate sponsors, because if you look, that's Saputo, it's Saputo's company. If you there could be money from the outside helping the Impact pay their bills if it was for more corporate big support, and that will come eventually with the in marketing and the commercial language, you have like tiers, right, of categories that bring you the most amount of views, most amount of exposure, right? When you sponsor the Canadians, you have a big exposure, and slowly but surely the Impact will become a higher tier and will attract bigger blue chip corporate sponsors, and then maybe will be in a better position financially. It's still difficult to be in the black for the Impact year in, year out since Major League Soccer. So there's that aspect. And if this is what Don Garber was talking about, I agree 100%. But this is not what we heard, but maybe that's what he meant.
All right. I do want to talk about the Canadian office idea and some of that stuff, Kevin. Let's take a break. Actually, now we'll come back. We'll pull this into our next block as well.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome back. As I said, going into the break, the other side of this, the other statement he made was this Canadian office idea. And Jonathan kind of, before I got it out, interjected. So I'll finish my thought from that now. I tweeted out a link from 2010, from May 17th, 2010. So exactly 7 years ago, this story was published in Forbes, which talked about how some in MLS were going to open a Canadian office in the very near future. This was 7 years ago. Obviously, it was a line of whatever derivative statement you want to put that, a line of crap is what I'll say, that they said back then to appease people that were trying to fight for this. But as Jonathan said, there's just really no reason for us, Kevin, that I can tell anywhere whatsoever that we should trust his word at this point. He's lied about this before on record. Why should we believe that they are now committed to building this Canadian office? And if they are, cynically speaking, it's only because they finally had, fire lit under their ass with the Canadian Premier League.
Yeah. And what would be the purpose of a MLS Canada office?
Let's chase corporate money is what they do it for. But yeah.
If you go
look,
back in other sports, Duane, in recent history, all right, there's not a lot of, outside of the NHL, which basically in every Canadian team, the NHL has basically an office, right? It's the footprint is big enough that it's not necessarily one specific office. The example I want to talk about is UFC. The UFC used to have a UFC Canada office. It was located in Toronto, and it was Tom Wright, the former commissioner of the CFL, that was the head of UFC Canada. And guess what? One of the first cost-saving measures they did was to close down the Canadian office. So I'm not necessarily convinced on Canadian offices lately in professional sports. You either want a presence and make a presence. You don't necessarily announce it. You just build the office. Like, this is not warranted of an announcement. So until I see it in action, and I see it bring benefit, and actually have people with good trust behind it and doing it for good reasons to actually help the sport in Canada and help Major League Soccer's side of the sport in Canada. And that's all well and good. It could be a selfish reason as to help Major League Soccer get more corporate sponsors in Canada. And it's fine, but they need to have the commitment that it's there to stay. And it's not going to be the first thing they cut when they're trying to save money a few years down the road, or that it's just there for perception and for convincing people. It has to be there for the right reason. And over the last few years, that UFC example, I kind of I was burned on those things, right? The idea of UFC Canada was actually helping. Guess what? The sport's almost dead in Canada since that closure. So, yeah, I'm cold to the idea until I see it happen.
Yeah, look, I think there is a symbolic reasons for opening an office, and I think that's probably a big part of what he made that announcement for yesterday. And whether they follow through it or not is going to be the question here. The cynicism is well earned in terms of their lack of follow through on trying to seriously address some of the concerns, the legitimate concerns that Canadian fans of this league have been bringing up time and time again for years and years and years. I've had conversations with Jonathan way back to Ben and I's show. So we're going back, Kevin and I have been doing this for 3 years now. So we're going back at least 4, 5, 6, 7 years, right? So this is not a new subject, some of these Canadian issues. And it really is frustrating that they only sort of did a half measure on the Canadians as domestics issue, only after the threat of the Canadian Premier League started to emerge. They still refuse to acknowledge what both NASL and USL have acknowledged by virtue of their actions to be a load of crap. That is the fact that they lean on this labor interpretation of the labor law. We always say it's a labor law. It's not a labor law. There is no labor law out there that says you can't have Canadians in MLS as count as domestics. Like, there's absolutely nothing that is that black and white out there. MLS has done a very effective job at selling, particularly its American fans of this, because a lot of American fans are sympathetic to this. Most of them are, mean well, and they look at the benefits of having, like, they don't worry so much about Americans playing in the league anymore because there's just going to always be some. So the American protectionism stuff doesn't exist so much amongst American fans anymore. So they look at this rule and they go, I understand where the Canadians are coming from. And ideally we'd like to do this, but MLS is effectively convinced these people that there is this hard and fast black and white law out there that they'd be in violation of. No lawyer that I've ever spoken to about this that has understanding of American employment law has ever stated in any true way that this is true, that this is something that absolutely is the case. And we've seen it in NASL and USL where Canadians are domestics league-wide now. So the fact that they can't do it is ridiculous. But at any rate, that's a bit of a rant on the side there. Look, I've been calling for them to open a Canadian office since about 2008. Because it just makes sense to me. If you're going to have a presence up here, at the very least, Kevin, they should at least have an executive in their front office, even if he's based out of New York, that is solely responsible for Canadian issues, solely responsible for liaisoning with the Canadian Soccer Association. That would be a step.
No, that's what I meant, right? I was not able to formulate it correctly and properly. Yeah, it's my fault. Words don't necessarily come out the way I always intend, but that's what I meant. Like, the actual physical office is not necessarily needed if you just do the work. It's 2017. I'm talking to Duane. He's in Toronto, and it feels like he's next to me. We had Jonathan. He's in New York. We have Mark for Scuderia. Like, things don't need to. You don't need to spend that amount of money. Like, the amount of money you would spend on building that MLS Canada office, just hire someone right now to do that job right now. And I think that will maybe reap the benefit without having the actual millions of dollar cost that would actually cost to build an MLS office. Because then if you build an MLS office, it has to be up to standard. It has to look good. It has to be the same type of design. You know what I mean? It's millions of dollars. And what does that benefit?
Well, yeah, just so going to hang a shingle on if they MLS Canada, they would likely be in the city I'm in because it's the biggest one. Might be in Vancouver though too.
Have
We
you
never
seen
know.
the
But
rents?
nonetheless, they're
Like,
they're
can you
gonna
imagine?
go to a good address, like somewhere in an expensive part of town. They're gonna put a big sign up. They're going to spend a lot of money on this office because they want it to look good. They want this perception out there that this is a first-class thing. When, all we really need is people that are actually paying attention to the issues that are out there. Now, to quickly turn this around, and I do want to talk a little bit about the Gold Cup TV rights, which were announced yesterday in a second here to end the show today. But the one pragmatic reason that I couldn't see, and I've advocated for this before, and it's a very I don't even know if it's clever. It's just a very pragmatic solution to the Canadians and domestics issue. Is if you open up MLS Canada and you make it a corporate office up here, you then could register your Canadian players with that as their employment and then transfer them wherever you want within the branch plan, right? There is no law whatsoever that would prevent a Canadian from going down to work for an American branch on loan, essentially, from their Canadian company while they're getting paid from their Canadian company. I dare any amateur or professional employment lawyer out there to show me how that would somehow be illegal and that would get around any labor laws that you seem to think exist out there to prevent you from making Canadians as domestic. So that would be the pragmatic reason to do it, but I don't get the feeling that that's why they're doing it. If they're going to open this, it will be so that they have a presence in the Canadian market to push back against what they may perceive as a threat coming from the Canadian Premier League. And that's unfortunate if that's the case, because, if they're fighting for the same dollars, the pie's only so big. And MLS has shown no inclination up till now to really care much beyond the bottom line in the three markets. So I'm a little bit pissed about this if that's all they're going to do. If they're going to open it up and make Canadians as domestics, then you know what? I welcome that challenge to the Canadian Premier League, and it's just going to get more Canadian players playing wherever. I don't really care where they play. I just want them playing, right? So that's where I come down on this, Kevin.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
All right, let's talk about something positive now. Well, how about we finish the show on a positive note? Because I kind of feel a little. I had my anger moment. I'm back to. Let's be nice now. Let's talk about some TV rights.
The Gold Cup's going to be on TSN.
Wow.
But last week I didn't know where it was going to be.
Last week we didn't know if it was going to be on TV.
Yeah, I had a feeling I might be watching on Facebook last week. So there you go.
That's positive.
No, this is the Gold Cup. They've signed multiple year rights to that. It's going to be focused on Canada and the Canadian teams in the CCL. They will show those games. The other games are going to be available on TSN Go platform. This is something Jonathan, if we'd had more time with him today, probably would have liked to talk about, because he's very he likes to beat the drum about how TSN doesn't use its web platform well enough. So this is, I think, a pretty good use to TSN Go.
He's got a good point. Nobody uses their online platform correctly. If you use my right, it's nobody really does use it 100% the way it could be. And look at ESPN. They're just slashing cost everywhere. It's the same sports that's coming. Don't be surprised if there's payments going to be due to the NHL very soon, right? So, so the online platforms, just like a potential Canadian office, are usually where you cut the fat, and they're not used to their full potential.
Yeah, well, but in the meantime, this one happened. So, but the sound of it reading this press release, it didn't really give entire details on the entire tournament, but what it sounds like is that Canada's games will be broadcast live on TV, probably like TSN 5 or whatever, which is fine. All the soccer fans care about is that they can watch this and that it won't be preempted, and that it should be fine at that in June. There shouldn't be any sort of conflicts that are going to take away from that. This is something that speaks to TSN's ongoing sort of commitment to the sport. They have the Champions League now. Obviously, they have done a pretty good job at that. A few delays here and there, some kinks have been worked out, but I think by and large, most people are happy with TSN's Champions League coverage, and TSN's MLS coverage, I think, has jumped leaps and bounds this year. They're doing a very good job on it with some very good, studio stuff and the
on location,
simulcast, a lot of it, but
on location as well. They send Christian Jack pretty much everywhere Toronto is, so that's positive as well. And you know what? That brought to my to my brain, what it propped up is, okay, TSN is committed to MLS. TSN is committed to the Canadian Soccer Association with the Gold Cup, and we see World Cup qualifiers on TSN as well. So the next step that could be maybe predictable, maybe possible, probable, Canadian Premier League on TSN.
Yeah, look, all signs point that that is the most likely destination for it. When you consider the massive CFL involvement in this league, and you consider also the commitment that they've shown to soccer across the board, the only complication might be, what that relationship between MLS and the Canadian Premier League is. And right now, I think we're too early in this stage of this game to understand completely what this relationship is going to look like. Paul Burns suggested yesterday, when you asked him about this, that there should be mutually beneficial ways for those two leagues to work together. But I think the jury's still out, because we are seeing some worrisome things. The Bill Manning interview that he did on Vocal Minority.
The Don Garber yesterday.
Even some of the stuff Garber said, yeah.
Exactly.
Precisely. So, sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
No, I just agree with you. I just said exactly.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, sorry. That's live radio again. It's twice in a row today. At any rate, no, it's there's worrisome stuff there. But to get back to Gold Cup, though, I think that we'll see most of the tournament available to us. In the past, it hasn't always been the case. If you wanted to watch, Haiti beat Cuba or something, and trust me, that's something that I tend to want to watch. You've had to find a legal means to do it in the past. I watched a lot of the last Gold Cup on, streaming sites on ESPN, it's not in a legal way. And I embrace the idea that I can legally watch this on streams that will be consistent and available to me at all times. And that's something I think that's a positive development. In a general sense, Kevin, I'm curious, and there's only a minute left. We're going to go today, but are you excited about the Gold Cup yet? I'm starting to be a little bit. Now, I'm working on the weekend, so I won't be able to watch City's last game of the year. So that was my last City game of the year yesterday. Fitting to go out with Zabs. But so that started to get me thinking as this was going. And then there was some Confederations Cup news that came out, and I went like, oh yeah, the Confederations Cup is coming up too. And I starting to warm up a little bit to some international tournaments and the Gold Cup with Canada involved in a month or so. Are you getting excited a little bit yet?
No, unfortunately, I am not. Not at all. I have to say, it was quite an experience to be at the Gold Cup. 2015 it was? Yeah, it was 2015 in Toronto. You know what I remember from that day? The 85-minute Benito Floro press conference. Actually, I don't remember. I just remember being there. I don't remember anything else from that press conference. And poor David Edgar just next to him, just waiting for 80 minutes before saying something. Yeah, that was something. Am I excited for the Gold Cup? Depends. How is Zambrano going to approach that Gold Cup? The roster? Will we see maybe a Baloo having to take a decision to see if he accepts a call? Kyle Larin, Tesho, and yeah, okay. Maybe if this roster is focused on the future and they're trying to get some young players involved, maybe I can get excited about it. Maybe Patrice Bernier for the one last time. Last Gold Cup of his career, that could be something I would get excited for. We're not it's not in 2000. Right? It wasn't expected in 2000. I agree, and Canada got the job done. Am I expecting Canada to go deep in the tournament? If I go with the results of the last few years, sorry, I'm not expecting anything. So I don't know how excited I should get. But it's a tournament, and it's one of the only trophies our country can play for right now. So yeah, why not?
Yeah, look, it's been a decade since Atiba was onside. That's a long, and that was the last time Canada was a factor in this tournament. And in fairness, they were a big factor in that tournament. They should have made the damn final. He was onside. I know it just would have tied the game, but the momentum was all going our way at any rate.
And at least would have tied the game. That's a start.
At least we would have got extra time. I think I'm quickly again. I've told this before, but I always remember about that game. I was watching at the Celtic Supporters Club in St. Catharines by myself, and I walked in, and there were a whole bunch of Scottish expats there, and they had like an old game on. It was like a repeat game on Sportsnet World or something. I would have called Santana at the time. And I said, "Oh, can I put this game on?" And I sort of had to explain what it was, and they were like, kind of a sign like, okay, well, it's live, so I guess we can't really say no because it was kind of the only soccer bar in the city at that point. So they put the game on, and they're paying no attention. These are Scottish expats that don't give two whatevers about Canada. But at the end of the game, the Scottish expats were screaming at the TV louder than me about the offside call. So that tells you how the glory of what it matters when you're competing at that level. How you can win fans pretty quick if you're competing, and hopefully Canada will get back to the day where Scottish expats will scream at the TV again. But we'll see. I can never turn away. It's like a car wreck. You just can't stop looking at it, the Canadian national team. But we'll look at that car wreck this summer, and maybe, just maybe, we'll get through the traffic this time. I don't know. That was a bad analogy, but maybe it's time to end the show on that.
Yeah, you can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee, the show at Soccer Today SPN, and Sis Yesterday. You can listen to this show live on Facebook, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. Like our page and make sure you get every show that we do live. Scuderia F1 will be live, and later tonight, Hardwood Radio will probably be live broadcasted on Facebook as well. It's an easy way for people to listen. Facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. Until tomorrow, as always, I'm Kevin Laramee, and have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.